So, at a $219 price tag, the Xbox Series X storage expansion card just is not worth it. Not yet, at least. And I'll show you why. I've been using the Series X for a few weeks now, and I've been experimenting with various types of storage media with it to see just how well each of those perform. If you're interested in seeing a comparison between the current gen and the previous gen console's performance on the same or similar games, get subscribed, as we'll be covering more of the storage capabilities in future videos. Now, just to clarify, I don't necessarily feel that the expansion card is not worth the price that you would be paying for it. It's just that at this time, there are none, or at the very least, very few games that could properly test the capabilities of the storage technology used in it. And of course, when more games are available for it that can properly utilize the technology that these storage devices use, then we will do a follow-up to see just how well it actually performs. And in order to test it, I compared it between other external drives, being a SATA SSD, an NVMe SSD, and a standard hard drive. And incidentally, it is the hard drive that came out of the Xbox One in the previous video, which you can see here. The tests performed are pretty well in line with what has previously been done. It is what I'm referring to press-to-prompt load time testing, which is measured from a button press to the moment that an additional button press is prompted. And of course, for the sake of not knowing exactly where storage is a factor in the load times, i.e. there may be connecting, processing, what have you, the entire loading from game menu to gameplay all is being measured and factored in. So when you see the graphs, there will be sectors that signify an additional prompt has been shown and gone through. In the graph shown, it is the average of multiple runs of each test. So every load time shown, it had been tested multiple times and the average was taken. But anyway, on to the tests. The first game that we have is, if you've seen the previous video, you will have seen this information already, is Grand Theft Auto 5. You could see the difference between the solid state options is arguably imperceptible from the average user's experience, and the only outlier, which should be no surprise, is the standard hard drive. The disparity in it is actually less than I was anticipating, but I'll get more into that in a little bit. When we get into Apex Legends, this is where it gets a little more surprising. I was especially surprised to see just how little the difference was between the hard drive and the SSDs in this run. It was still noticeable, but it was much, much smaller than the Grand Theft Auto test. All in all, the hard drive is the only one that exceeded more than a couple of seconds, much like the Grand Theft Auto test. In Far Cry 5, the load times were a little bit longer than I would have expected, but they are still noticeably shorter than the previous console generation. But the trend still holds that all of these solid-state drives maintain a similar load time, and the hard drive is a little bit longer. And in the narrowest differential of the games that were tested in this series is Bioshock, the Xbox 360 version. I wanted to get at least one in that was of the previous generation because the console is backwards compatible with all previous generations of systems, so I figured this would be relevant. And probably shouldn't be surprising, but the difference narrows even further. All of the solid-state drives were within a second of each other in their load times, and the external hard drive was only a few seconds longer. What this shows is a trend towards all of the solid-state drives having similar performance, internal to external and higher end to lower end, the only outlier being the hard drive. In a couple of cases, the hard drives were much closer than I would have expected. Now, the other factor that we can take into consideration is Quick Resume, which I can confirm works for all games on the Xbox One that I've tested so far on all storage media. So even if you have an external hard drive, you can still enjoy the benefits of Quick Resume. Unfortunately, Quick Resume does not work on the Xbox 360 games that I have tried. If you are playing on an online game, Quick Resume will still work, but once you have Quick Resumed, you will have to reconnect to your game. Now, one test I have added for this one is something that in theory should be more of a test of raw drive speed performance, in that it is literally just the drive doing the work, and that is copying games over. So obviously it's only as fast as the fastest drive being used. So for this test, what I did was I copied the game from the internal to each respective external drive. I started with a couple of smaller games. I did Castlevania, which is less than a gig, and when it's that small, at least on the solid state drives, it gets kind of almost immeasurable. I mean, it's a couple of seconds. The initialization may be a contributing factor, because at least in the case shown, the expansion card actually took longer, which it was literally only a couple of seconds. However, the hard drive was clearly much longer in the copy process, which should be of no surprise. This is where the differences in the storage media really stands out. Next, I did Final Fantasy VII. This is the Xbox One port of it, so it is an Xbox One game. It is also not a very large game. This one was, if I remember correctly, about 5 gigs. So there was a bit more time to measure, and this actually showed a similar trend. Now, as you'll see in the next one, this trend doesn't hold true for larger games, so given that it was just the couple of games that this showed up in, for the moment I'll just attribute it to just a random coincidental occurrence, but I'll check a few more to see if this trend continues, and if it does, I'll do a follow-up and share with you what I've found. The hard drive, as with the previous one, the trend kind of holds true, where the drive takes much longer because it's just the drive itself doing all the work. So this should be little surprising. And lastly, we did Arkham Knight. This one was about a 40 gig game, so there was a significant amount of time being used. And this one, in total, between the solid state drives, it was a difference of about a minute. And then the hard drive, this is where it really shows its age, and it took a whopping 27 minutes to copy over. This was by far the biggest show of just how slow a hard drive actually is. Now, with a larger sample size, you could refine this information further and get a more precise take on the exact differences between the external drives and the internal drive. However, you can definitely tell that the expansion card is more likely to be seen as fast as the internal solid-state drive, but as close as the external SATA is to that, they're effectively the same. There's not a great enough difference for it to be a concern. So where does that leave us? For now, I would say save your money and get a SATA SSD, or depending on how you play and how you have your library set up, a mechanical hard drive is still a viable option, and it would afford you much greater storage capacity. So that would kind of depend on your situation, whether an external SSD or an external hard drive would be right for you. But either way you go, the expansion card just is not worth it at this time. We'll have to wait and see what develops with the new and enhanced games that are coming out specifically for the Series X as to what advantages lie ahead. I would see it being 6 months to a year before the expansion card will be a viable option, and by then the price will probably drop as well. But as it stands, at a $219 premium, you just wouldn't be getting your money's worth. For around the same price, you could get twice the amount of capacity in a SATA SSD. Now, obviously, there may be factors of in-game asset loading and in-game load time, so it's not all-encompassing, but if you don't play more than 4 or 5 games at a time, Quick Resume is going to be your main load time to take into consideration, and Quick Resume works with all media formats, as long as it's an Xbox One or newer game, at least from what I could tell at this point. And as always, the floor is open to comments and questions, so if there is anything that I may have overlooked as far as taking into consideration as to the viability of the expansion card, do let me know. Go ahead and shout it out in the comments, or if you have any other comments or questions about what was covered in this video, do let me know, or if you have any suggestions of something to take in consideration in future coverage, we would love to hear it, so do let us know. Well, that is all I had for this one. Just kind of wanted to give with some observations on the expansion card and its current level of viability. Obviously, that may change in the near or distant future, and when it does, we will be back with more coverage on it. And of course, stay tuned as we have much more coverage on this and various topics regarding the latest generation consoles. And of course, we always have plenty of Let's Plays for you to watch and enjoy if you are into such things. Well, I hope you did find this entertaining and or informative, and if it did, go ahead and like it. If not, dislike it. You know, that's what it's there for. Let us know how you truly feel. And until next time, have a lovely day.